"100 years ago, the valleys of South Wales supplied coal for the world. Coal was king, the miners were aristocrats of labour and good spenders when they had it. South Wales could afford the best of the travelling fairs. These weren't just swings and roundabouts. In those days, the showman presented a bill full of variety: music hall acts, ghost projections, live theatre, with a strong dash of melodrama, plus menageries with animal acts. Family dynasties ran these fairs, the very roots of show business. And when a new craze, moving pictures, appeared in 1896, the showman instantly advertised it. Hand-carved, beautifully painted, electrically lit, the fronts promised a paradise, inhabited by strong men and midgets. And beautiful girls, the paraders. The exuberance of the display was the box office lure. The first showman to present films in South Wales was Will Haggard. He ran a theatre, sometimes with actors and sometimes with marionettes. At least they didn't get drunk. But in 1897, he bought a projector and some films and christened the venture the Royal Electric Bioscope. The shows were part lantern slide and part film, driven along by music and a narrator. The Worthies in each district visited by the fair had still to be convinced of the wholesome nature of film. Haggard was once denounced in a local paper for pitching his bioscope opposite a pub. Another time, he tried to avoid trouble by inviting the local parson to a preview that included this film. The twiddling and occasional glimpses of leg alarmed the parson until Haggard assured him that it was Salome, dancing for the head of John the Baptist. Sunday shows were very popular. After community singing to coloured slides, a film would be selected from a special Sunday box. These 4 scenes are from Buy Your Own Cherries, a film based on a temperance ballad being pushed in the music halls as part of a crusade against working-class drunkenness. Haggard gave 3/4 of the takings from his Sunday shows to local charities, and this illuminated address from the Aberdare branch of the railway workers shows the affection the family enjoyed. And when Haggard bought himself a camera and first made his own films, they were of local events, train rides, football matches, even just crowds of local people. But with his theatrical background, Haggard was inevitably drawn to drama. This is his first chase film, made near Maesteg. The poacher's net was borrowed for the day from a fairground coconut stall. starts unpromisingly with the outdoor location used like an indoor stage. Enter stage left, exit stage right. But then the camera plucks up the courage to execute a pan. And suddenly we're into a classic and very cinematic chase sequence. The Haggars had 11 children, and all of them worked in show business. As a boy, Will Haggard Sr. had been apprenticed to a carpenter, but ran away with a travelling theatre. He married the owner's daughter, Sarah, and although Sarah couldn't read a word, she knew 7 Shakespeare plays by heart. The middle son, Walter, doubled as business manager and actor. He plays the lead in the family's most famous film. It's the story of the notorious burglar, Charles Peace. The sets were all constructed by Father William, the trained carpenter, and as ever, the family take the main roles. Mrs. Haggard plays the burglar's mother. Violet Haggard helps Walter hide in the bed. The youngest daughter, Lily May, plays a boy. 3 brothers play policemen, and the style is full-blooded. Haggard portrays Peace with surprising sympathy. The real Charles Peace had been executed in Leeds in 1897 for murdering his girlfriend's husband. The public in those days must have appreciated a good murder, since Charlie Peace was something of a folk hero by the time the film was made. The film has 16 scenes that last 12 minutes and was shot in and around Pembroke Dock in South Wales. The film-making years of the showman came to an end when the common practice changed from showing the same film in different places to different audiences to showing different films in the same place to the same audience. That meant permanent theatres rather than wood and canvas. From 1909 on, there was a scramble to find halls to convert, or, as the Haggards did, to build your own cinema. Now the vigour the show people had once put into making films would be used to promote other people's films. Haggard's career as a filmmaker ended as it began with the coverage of local events. This is a society wedding in Llanelli in 1912. In the last frames, the Haggard family salute the camera, but their films were by now signed over to one of the big distributors, Gaumont. But the fairground people helped make factual films popular with audiences, and distributors had to meet this demand. One producer stands out, Charles Urban, a personal friend of Haggart's, an American. Urban had set out to make his fortune selling encyclopedias, but when the inventor Edison put his kinetoscope on the market in 1894, Urban ran Michigan's first peep show. And when Edison went international, Urban crossed the Atlantic to manage the London office. Soon he set up on his own, selling French films made by Lumière and Méliès. But his real ambition was to compile the world's first visual encyclopedia. Using the trade name Bioscope, Urban sent camera operators around the world to record its wonders. Ormiston Smith climbed the Alps. Joe Rosenthal explored Africa. George Rogers, an American, was sent to film the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 from the Russian side. Rogers also got exclusive footage of the beheading of a Chinese bandit. Urban had to keep telling customers that his film showed the real thing. Many of his competitors weren't over concerned with authenticity. Using costumes from pantomimes and a few local extras, though not too local in case they're recognized, the film fakers would scour newspapers for dramatic news that could be reconstructed for local screening. These reports of missionaries being murdered in China appeared in a Blackburn paper, and next day, amongst the bracken of Darwin Moor, a missionary defends his family from the Yellow Peril. In this example, the missionary was played by the filmmaker himself, Sagar Jones Mitchell. The moors above Blackburn did service as backdrop to many a headline-making event in China, Japan, and South Africa. Mitchell even drew stars in the negative to give extra effect to the guns firing. The films often reflected press propaganda and public prejudice. It was all right to hunt down Boers, and they were not to be trusted. There were, however, complaints about the biased treatment of the Boers, which drew the following rather prophetic editorial from the Kinematograph Journal. The production of a fake picture is probably a much more onerous piece of work than taking of a genuine film. In the latter, there is no stage managing, and if the actors do not quite make the best of their opportunities from the point of view of the cameraman, there is some consolation in the knowledge that an actual event is being recorded. The public will be satisfied with a very meagre amount of action in a genuine film, but with an acted piece, they demand exciting incidents to balance the lack of truth. This is why fake war films, which everybody knows to be faked, are invariably more bloodthirsty than the real thing. We are inclined to lay it down as a maxim that where there is not truth, there must be other means taken to provide greater interest to balance the loss. Quite so. As early as 1900, the British Army, already alert to the propaganda value of film, staged exercises just for the camera. Charles Urban acted as filmmaker to the War Office in peacetime, on this occasion with the Navy. Objections were raised to an alien making films for the British military. Urban replied that he thought an alien was a term that applied to an unkempt Russian refugee or an unwashed foreign criminal. I do not associate the term with an American gentleman, he said. But to be on the safe side, he immediately applied for and got British citizenship. Urban fought to get factual films on the screen, and he also persuaded industry to sponsor them. His biggest client was the London and North Western Railway. Urban's audience was mostly working class, and he believed rightly that they would want to see themselves on screen, not just as background, but as a central subject of factual films. Through film, the working experience could be communicated more vividly. People could at last see something of how the other half lived. By 1910, factual films were an expected part of most programs. Charles Urban's enthusiasm breathed life into the form which eventually came to be called the documentary. To the images of reality common to all the pioneers of cinema, he added an essential extra, a strong sense of public purpose. With the passage of time, even a sponsored film can become a rare document of working life before the First War. In 1910, Charles Urban was Britain's #1 producer and distributor. He moved to Wardour Street, London, which was to become the main street of the British movie business, and he set up Urbanora House. From Wardour Street, Urban launched the first colour system that didn't rely on dyeing or stenciling the film stock. The invention had been patented by a Brighton pioneer, J.A. Smith, and called Kinemacolor. Urban paid £5,000 to market it. This is a bioscope camera modified for colour filming. The camera used black and white stock, specially sensitized, and behind the lens there was a shutter with a red filter and a green filter. The pull-through mechanism was the same as for black and white film, but it had to be run at twice the normal speed, 32 frames per second instead of 16. So alternate frames got green filtered light, then red filtered light. And when the film was projected, red and green filters were placed in the shutter and synchronized with the appropriate frame. Run to speed, red and green merge. These are 3 test films made by the inventor George Albert Smith, and this is the first time they've been seen in public for almost 70 years. Charles Urban gave support and money to anyone prepared to experiment with film. This technique is simple, it's reverse photography. The man operating was a newcomer to Urbanora House, Percy M. Smith. Smith had previously spent 14 years in public education, but in showing Urban his still photographs of insects and flowers, he was immediately given a cinema camera to try. adapted to run at unusual speeds, 1 frame per second, 1 frame per minute, one a day, even one a month. The camera started Percy M. Smith on a pioneering career in time-lapse filming, a startling new way of seeing the world. Smith also experimented in microphotography. He became instantly famous, even notorious, as newspapers complained that he'd been cruel to his performing flies. But all the ingenuity of the staff at Urban Orra House was not enough to guarantee success. Just when Urban and his factual films had staked a serious claim to be part of the cinema circuit, the 1914-18 war changed the whole scene. With the help of his War Office contacts, Urban himself made a propaganda film to get America into the war on Britain's side. It was judged a success when he screened it in America, but Urban got no thanks from the British government, and after the war, he stayed on in America. He founded the Urban Institute, a film library dedicated to information and education. To entertain and to amuse is good, his motto ran. To do both and instruct is better. Charles Urban's institute failed. He returned to Britain and he died in Brighton in 1942 in obscurity. Yet it can be fairly said that the much acclaimed British documentary movement had an American grandfather.